Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the LPEA Board of Directors meeting. We'll start off the meeting in the traditional fashion with join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of
the United States
of America,
to the republic
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible,
with liberty and
justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's well, I guess we've called the meeting to order, and any comments or changes to the posted agenda? Rachel. Oh, go ahead, Rachel.
I think Tim and I have the same thing. I'd like to request that we add a moment to talk about our broadband partnerships in executive section.
Okay, thank you. Any other suggested modifications to the agenda? And maybe I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda with Rachel's suggested change.
So moved by Kohler.
All right, thanks, Kohler, and
Second.
I'll take John as the second. Okay, any other discussion about these changes to the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed to that? Any people abstaining? Okay, unanimous. Agenda will stand with that one change in executive session, and we can move into member comments. Graham, will you give us the preamble to that?
Yes, the board encourages comments about the cooperative from its members. The board asks that each participant's comments pertain to cooperative business. Those wanting to address the board during comment period are granted 5 minutes to address their topic. Lengthy comments to the board should be submitted in writing, and formal complaints must be filed and submitted in compliance with applicable board policy. Comments from the public will be directed to the entire board and not to any individual. No personal attacks shall be allowed. Failure to follow these requirements may cause the public comment period to be terminated. Copies of our policies and procedures on public comment and complaints are available at our website. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any hands up, any members wishing to make comment during the comment period? I don't see any hands in the panelists or in the attendees room. Okay, we will close the comment period then. And move into, yes. Oh, Dan, how did I, I'm nervous. It's my first time. Thanks for reminding me. So yeah, Director Huntington wants to make a comment sort of at the end of the public comment period. So you have the floor, Dan.
Yeah, I was the one that made the comment about people being selfish and kind of self-centered. That was after that discussion. This is on anything that new needs to come about. People want new stuff, but they're not willing to give up anything to do that. You know, if we put a solar farm someplace else, we're going to need to do a transmission line to a substation or build a substation. So people have to realize that they can't have their cake and eat it too. And but that was what I wanted to comment about, and I'm not going to apologize for my statement.
All right, Dan, thank you. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for bringing it, to the public portion of the meeting. And, I think as was indicated in our reply, we certainly appreciate everyone's opinion, and we're not here to stifle those opinions. And an individual or several individual directors' statements or opinions are not board policy. It's not intended to come across that way. So again, thank you very much, Dan, and we'll move on from there into section 3 of the agenda, consent board items. We'll either take a motion to approve that or actually, we probably need a motion to approve prior to discussion and potentially removing anything from the consent board. So if there's someone out there that would do that.
So moved by Kohler.
Yeah, Kohler, thank you for the motion. And I see Joe Lewandowski as a second. Any discussion on consent board items? Anything anybody wants to remove?
Can I pull out the training requests?
Yes, Rachel. We'll discuss training requests separately. Tim, I see you.
Maybe Graham could just comment on what the process is for consent agenda. My understanding is you don't need a motion per se. People can pull it off and then afterwards we vote on it, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, so I think the way we're handling it today, right, and I think this is just fine, is that the motion is now pending on the floor, and any item that any individual director wants to pull off is pulled off. So Rachel's request to remove item 3E, director travel and training requests, is removed and will be considered separately. It does not require a second or any sort of vote for that removal. So that's now, so now the motion that would be pending is the remaining consent items except for E, unless another director would like to remove a separate item. So I think that's what we're doing right now, is having a call for items to be removed.
And just for my clarification, Graham, thanks, and thanks, Tim, for asking. We don't need to modify the motion then as things are removed. Appreciate that. Any other requests for removal? And Tim, was that clear enough for now?
Yeah, I mean, I think just in the past, what we've done is we pulled something and then gone to a motion rather than the other way around. So,
yeah, then the motion reflects the things that we actually are consenting.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me bring that up with Graham offline, and we'll work through that process and revise it again for next meeting. Thanks for asking. Okay, no other removals. And we have a motion and a second to approve the consent board items. So all in favor of approving the consent board items, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Okay, any opposed or abstentions? Okay, consent board items pass, and we will take up the training budget. And Rachel, you go ahead and lead that since you pulled it off.
Awesome. Thank you. This was just an addition and a request on my end. I didn't get it in by, it was last Friday. I was looking at different trainings coming up. I can't make it to summer school. I know that was something we had discussed last week, but there's one of the classes that's being offered is in online training on board role in EV policy and rate structures. I believe that's offered by the NRECA online August 29th and 30th. And I was hoping to get approval to attend that. It would be $690. And I've not spent any of my 2023 fiscal year training budget. So just requesting approval from you all to attend that.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. We will consider that. Questions and comments? Tim, I see your hand.
Yeah, I move to approve the training request Director Landis made a few moments ago.
Okay, do I have a second for Tim's motion? I see John Lee, thank you. Any more discussion on Tim's motion about approving Rachel's expenditures? Is it Kohler, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm in favor of this motion, but I just wanted to tell Rachel, I took this class last year and it was extremely disappointing. And the reason why is it's really geared up for co-ops that have not gotten into the EVs and that kind of stuff yet. And what you'll find is we're way ahead of most of those. And out of a 6-hour class, I think I got an hour's worth. So I'm all for education. And if you want to take it, fine. You might look at the other resource that Jessica said and see if that has a subject, because it was a big disappointment for me. Just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean, Rachel, I can ask Dan too, because I know his staff has gone through education as well, and we can ask to see if there's a better class, if you're interested.
Okay, cool. Well, then I will, thanks so much for that insight, Kohler. That's really actually very helpful. So maybe I will rescind my request. I will do additional research. And if I still want to attend this one, I'll bring it back at the August meeting because I know you can register up until the 23rd of August. So I pull it off the table. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Well, I would discourage that, Rachel. I think you should at least get approved because you can, say you're not going to do it later. And again, I don't want to discourage you from education.
Get the money.
Please don't take it that way.
And can I recommend that maybe what the motion would be is that you would approve it, and then if there's a better class, you can just transfer that over without having to come back?
That seems good. Tim, it's your motion. Are you okay with that modification?
Yeah, I mean, my view is that we're approving Rachel's expenditure for attending this class up to whatever that price was, right?
Yeah.
$700 or whatever it was, right? So if she doesn't use it this time and wants to use it the next time, the authorization's still in place.
Sounds great.
Cool.
Anything else, Kohler? I still see your hand up. Okay. All right. Any further discussion on Tim's motion to approve Rachel's budget addition to her training request? Seeing none, we'll vote. All in favor? Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? And abstentions? All right. Looks like it's unanimous, Rachel. Thanks for bringing that to us. And thanks for continuing on and being interested in the training. On to section 4 of our agenda, CEO and staff reports. I think take it away, Jessica.
Okay, thank you. I will share my screen. In 2 seconds. Okay, can everybody see that? All right. Start with the key performance indicators. Okay, so we are green checks on everything except for cash reserves again, and Carl will address that a little bit later in his financial report. But as of today, we're back on track with cash. This has been happening about 4 times this year so far. So as we've mentioned before, we are going to bring this back to the FAC to look at the goal. So any questions on this? It's hard for me to see anybody, so please speak up if I've missed you. Okay. And as I mentioned, Carl will go through more of the financial section on this. All right, and be safe and excellent in all we do. I don't know if you see a full screen. Trying to change the screen to be a little smaller so you guys can see it on one page. Does that work better? Sort of. All right, well, I'll keep going. Okay, experienced no lost time incidents or accidents. Unfortunately, we did have 1 lost time last month due to privacy laws. We cannot talk about this, but the person is recovering. So that's good news. And as we do in every lost time, but we also do this for any close calls, we actually take a pause and we get the crews together and we talk about what happened, and we develop a memo that does not include the person's name because we don't want that to be something that limits people from actually reporting these. So we try to make it more of an educational component. So unfortunate that this happened. It is a good learning opportunity for the rest of the crews. It does remind them we have to be safe in everything we do. So we did send that memo out to all employees. We don't just send them out to crews because it's important for all employees to understand what's going on. So everything else on this slide is green check, which is good news. 0 cyber incidents. Drew's team is really focused on locking down our system. So if you are sending emails to me and you don't hear a reply, we found that sometimes some emails, such as yours or others, are getting blocked. And that's good news, but I understand it can also be a little frustrating, but it's pretty important these days. We are getting a lot of information from the ISAC. And for Nicole, I'm not sure if you know who they are. I know David knows who they are, but they're kind of a national organization that provides information to electric utilities. And this is the Energy ISAC. And they're filled with federal government entities like FBI, CIA. And so they send us notices almost on a daily basis about things that could potentially impact us both physically and on a cyber front. So we are in tune to that and stay educated on that information. Okay, any questions on this page?
Don't see any hands, Jessica.
Okay.
Oh, I do see a hand. Freeze.
Okay,
Yeah,
freezing.
Kirsten's hands up.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, I had my hand up on the camera and couldn't find my bloody hand on the screen. The rebuilt and updated one of our data collection, can you at least tell us which area that was in?
Yeah, so that was our SCADA system.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, it's good stuff. So I mean, just all of these points about departments using data analytics, really proud of our teams for all looking at different ways to use the data. We have a lot of data, right? And in the past, we haven't been using it. And so it's been very important. We put a fine-tuned focus on saying, we have all this data, we should be looking at it and doing data analytics and finding trends and figuring out how to do better. And so really, really excited that the team is working on this. Okay,
And Tim's got his hand up.
great, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if you can clarify, but I thought you said that there were some messages that were being blocked. And I mean, is that like going into spam or like something different? Because I've had messages from LPEA going to my spam, stuff that is in my address book and so forth. And it only happens with this LPEA account.
Yeah,
So
Dan, that's a good question, Tim. Drew, do you mind kind of expanding on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. There's actually quite a few filters in place that could potentially block email. So generally speaking, anything with an @lpea.coop address should come through. So if that's not happening, get with us individually and we can work through that. Having contacts in your list definitely helps, but you still might have to add them to a safe senders list. The other thing that we found is we've had like before the new directors were onboarded and had LPEA email addresses. You know, if you're using a Gmail or a Yahoo type account, then keywords will trigger filters to put it in spam. So sorry if that's not a real clear answer, but you know, to Jessica's point, there's so much bad stuff and phishing attempts that go through email. We just really have to tighten up those filters a lot. So please do keep an eye on the junk mail folders, and if anything doesn't look right, then get a hold of us.
Right, I guess my question really is, like, would I expect to find that in a spam folder, or is there a possibility that I never even see it? In which case I wouldn't know that I'd missed something.
Right. Great question. No, it would land in your junk folder, in the spam folder.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Drew.
You bet.
Thanks, Tim and Drew. And Kirsten, I see your hand up.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Drew, you just mentioned external emails that we sometimes use before we have our LPEA. That does remind me that some of us used to forward so that we would only working out of one mailbox, used to forward our co-op addresses to our personal addresses. We learned not to do that because it's a mess when you come to discovery. So if any of you, just a reminder, if any of you are considering that, just don't do it. Just check both email addresses all the time.
Thank you, Kirsten. That's absolutely true. Definitely encourage you to use just your LPEA email.
Okay,
Right.
great. Jessica.
Thank you. Good discussion. Okay, keep the lights on. So we are doing really well on our wildfire mitigation plan. So that's great. It's good to get ahead. But as we've mentioned before, we're slowing a little bit down on that because of capital projects now that we can get to. But I was just told recently that some of our capital projects are going to be delayed a little bit as well because some of our member projects are now superseding those. And I thought this was interesting. A lot of our member projects some of them are larger than some of our capital projects because these are big places being built kind of in remote areas. So they require lots of tree trimming work, clearing, and then line extension. So that'll be interesting to see at the end of the year where we're at on that. The 2 new Vipers, as we mentioned, you would have seen that press release we sent out. I'm sure John Lee can fill us in more on this with these red flag warning days. We are now putting these Vipers on 1 shot, which means that if there is a blink, and Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, then it doesn't automatically reconnect on those specific lines, because we want to make sure that there is not a hazard and that it's actually there's a line on the ground, because if there is a line on the ground and we re-energize, it could cause a fire. And because of these very dry days with high winds, that would be a potential disaster. It could go really fast. So we put those settings in place. The negative part of this is this will impact our SAIDI and safety numbers to the negative. And that's because we require our line workers to go out and physically inspect the lines. They have to go out there physically. And typically in some of these areas are hard to get to and far. So just wanted to let folks know that our SAIDI and safety numbers are not going to look good when we have these red flag warnings potentially, but they are there to protect life and property. Rachel, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm curious because it seems like it's a really wise and cautious thing to do. What is our average? I guess there is no average response time because it really depends on where this would take place in the service territory, huh? So maybe a better question is there kind of the comms plan to just help educate our membership about this and why it's what's happening, why it's important, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes, so take a look at the press release that we sent out, and we've been going around and making sure it's on our websites, our press.
Okay.
We send out our monthly newsletters. It's also in there. And so it's pretty detailed. We spent a lot of time working on the press and our communications and making sure that it was written in a way that's very simple to understand. So if it's not, let me know. And Joe, especially you, because you're an expert on this. But we really, to your point, Rachel, we really wanted to hit that hard to make sure folks understood why.
Great. It seems like that could be a good one too in those, because we get so much positive feedback on the little text messages everyone gets when they have an outage. Like a good place to just cascade that message and replicate it. But okay, yeah, cool. And then this was another question that I had, which is actually sparked by something I was reading maybe in the Tri-State report about, or maybe it was an article, but with courts finding utilities liable when wildfires start from ground lines that are down. And so actually, no, I'll save that question for later. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Kohler.
Yeah, two different things. One is with these new settings, are you seeing results already? And the reason I ask that is I've had a couple of members mention that they've had some outages in the Bodo area and also the Escalante area. And I didn't know if I should tell them, yeah, this is probably part of this wildfire setting.
We have yet to have a Viper open under fire settings. The Bodo Park outage was due to a mapping and switching error the other day.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And the second thing is, and we might have gone over this, I can't remember, but I know that LPEA was involved with other groups, the Southern Utes and others, of building a weather station. And what is the status of that weather station? Is it up and going, or?
That's a good question that I will find out. I have not heard anything about that. Dan?
Yeah, it's underway. It's going out near the airport. Its contracts are in place and construction should start relatively soon, along with all the other airport construction.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dan. All right, Joe.
Yeah, I'm not sure, you might want to talk about this later or some other spot, but I'm just wondering with, the crazy heat waves going on all around, in Texas and Arizona and stuff, is that, how does that affect us, I guess? Are we in danger of anything from those, those, all the air conditioners that are being run in Phoenix and everywhere else?
Dan, do you want to address that?
Yeah, our winter peaks are so much greater than summer, that we haven't come close to hitting that right now. So we got ample capacity here.
Great, thanks.
All right, John.
I just wanted to, on the fire side of things, recognize the strong response by LPEA for safety to de-energize some of those lines over on the fires where the fire crews were. That seemed very rapid and smooth to get that done. And then I also think it's a good idea that on the red flag conditions that exist, that operationally they're making it a deliberate decision to turn it back on, not just automatically switch something. I think that will be a great opportunity to mitigate something that could have started a fire again, especially as we're drying out. So great work on both of those activities, even though they're kind of bundled into one.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Okay. Rachel, did you have another question on this?
Yeah, just one question, because it mentions the 6 bad underground cables, and I know there's some member comments around this. I'm curious. I know we've talked about this when we talk capital projects, but if you could remind me, with the kind of cycling through and replacement of kind of lines, and as lines naturally age, et cetera, do we have a pretty good deferred maintenance plan and feel like we're cycling through it away? I know there was like a gap, it seemed like, in replacement. And so maybe we're doing some catch up. Overall, on the pacing of just keeping up with equipment as it degrades, how is that going or feeling?
Yeah, good, great question. Dan, do you want to address that one?
Yeah, Rachel, we do a 5-year work plan or 5-year rolling work plan. So right now, Jake is preparing our 2024 capital projects budget. So he's out there looking for where we have concentric neutral cable, old copper wire, aged facilities that start sliding into the work plan queue. And it's interesting that some of these places we've had faults, they were like in queue for next year's replacements. So some of the faults beat us to the punch just a little bit, but we do have it on our radar.
And I would say, Rachel, just from my experience, and Jerry and Dan can correct me, but I mean, this is a pretty old system in a lot of areas, and it seems like we just continuously have more and more failures because it's just hitting that same timeline when they first put it in. It's like, Jerry, what are these 30-year-old? Am I off 20 cables?
Some of the
Longer?
areas are probably closer to what, Dan, 40, 50?
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, 40 easily.
So we're hitting their life cycle, unfortunately, at the same time.
And it's something we've got to keep our eye on because, we started off putting a little bit of underground in and really picked up putting a lot of underground in. And so what we have in our work plan now is the little bit of the oldest stuff that we have, but it's going to become a larger and larger part of our budget in the future as we get to those years where we put in a lot of facilities. But fewer overhead to replace. So it all balances out.
Okay. So I think because that was the big thing I'm just keeping my eyes on. It sounds like, yes, aware of it, aware that there's kind of this snowballing replacement process that's going to take place. And we are planning for that. It's not just going to kind of smack us in the face.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Rachel, we're always going to see more underground faults with the wetter the winter is. Or if we get a lot of rain and moisture in the springtime, we're going to start seeing more faults.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, good questions. Okay. source clean, local, low-cost power. So we have entered the service agreement with FTI Consulting for market insight and evaluation of the partial full buyout options. Can't get into details here, but we will definitely provide more of a detailed discussion during executive session because that is an NDA contract. And then continue to pursue local clean power projects. So great news. Dan and his team did a fantastic job. He spent a lot of time with homeowners. And it's kind of Dan Huntington put it, not everybody is going to be 100% happy, but we're going to try to do our best to mitigate as much as possible. But we're never going to get 100% happiness. So that is moving forward. The county did provide the permitting and that lets us move forward. So good, really great news on that. We will be coming to the board later on a proposal for community share program. So stay tuned for that. That'll come this fall. Okay, any questions on that? Tim?
So I'm not sure what would be presented in the fall. And I think there's still kind of an outstanding action that we need to take, which is who gets to subscribe and how that's approved. I mean, we're building it, which is really good. And I congratulate everyone on getting us through the permitting and so forth. But I think that piece, I'm not sure when that piece is going to be brought forward and discussed. And I think it's really critical that we do that sooner than later. I also, it's unclear to me when you say there's an NDA on this, you know, what can and cannot be spoken about this, but I've got members who are asking about some of the economics and so forth of this. I think in our public presentation, we need to be able to say how this is funded, what are sources, what are our expectations around that, and how we might have used the IRA and so forth. I think we as a board have learned some of this, but it's unclear to me what I'm able or unable to speak to with my members about this. So thanks.
And just to clarify, are you talking about the Sunnyside Solar Project?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I think we can provide all the funding fully. Dan, is that right? I mean, we can't provide pricing because that's proprietary, but we can talk about how it was funded. Is that
right?
correct?
And the partners that are involved and what they, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't know if there's a presentation on that. I mean, and we've talked about it at various times, but I think it is important, I think, for members to understand who are the other partners, and those partners probably want that to be known, as well as, you know, the economics of how we've utilized recent changes, you know, IRA and so forth to arrive at the economics of this. So there's an economics question, and then there's also who gets to participate question, I think, which it's not real clear to me right now how much of that we're sharing and or when we might share that.
Yeah, I think, Dan, we've been pausing and holding until we've gotten this approved. So we really haven't worked on that. So the solar share will definitely, I assume we'll probably bring to the FAC committee or the policy committee to review. And then we need to figure out how we're going to do this in the context of the budget this fall. So I don't have a good schedule for you yet. I just need to work with the team to figure out what do we have the capacity, when are we going to do it? Well, plenty of time to discuss this with the board. And in regards to all the other questions about the public, I think those are great. We do have a website dedicated to the Sunnyside Solar Project. So I'll work with Dan and the team to see what else we can add for information, because I think it is good to tell people how we got the funding, where we got it, and who our partners are.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ted? Nope. Okay. All right. Thank you. Next one. All right. Be a trusted community partner. Had another heat pump contractor training seminar. 4 full days. So they're very detailed, in-depth, very technical, which is great. We did have 13 installers, both from Durango and Pagosa. So that's great news. When I look at our numbers of rebates for heat pumps, if you'll see in the appendix, they're skyrocketing. And I do really think that a lot of it is because we're getting out to the community, educating them on the benefits of heat pumps. So that's been fantastic. And then this is another great picture of Colorado students at the Electric Co-op Youth Tour. Very proud of Ethan. He was one of the students that we sent, and he was elected by his peers to represent Colorado. So pretty excited that we can support our youth in that effort. Rachel.
Yeah, I was curious about when you all gave the heat pump training, if there was any feedback or kind of common themes that came from the installers to help inform like additional or future trainings. I got stopped on the trail the other day by a member who is so very excited about heat pumps. And one piece of feedback he gave is he's not an installer, but he's learned how to do it watching YouTube and has done it for all of his friends because no one can find people to, I think he was talking mini splits, right? Mm-hmm. But anyways, and he was telling me about all the new, I think it's rebates coming down the pike, and it just seems like there'll be even more demand soon. And so the more trained folks we can get trained, because I doubt too many people have friends on the trail that are going to install their mini splits. So
fix mine.
Yeah, so to your point,
I
Rachel,
signed up to get in the queue. I was like, yes.
It's a big problem. So, I've been waiting for 5 months, honestly, for my heat pump. So, it is unfortunately like the trainings are great, but it's the contractors. They need to just bring more contractors here. So I agree.
We currently have 16 qualified installers on our website listed there.
Okay. One thing to flag, I don't know if this is, I was just looking at this for the Good Food Collective, but DOLA's got some really interesting workforce apprenticeship funds available right now. So I don't know if that's like a little thing we could dangle in front of installers, but it would pay for additional training and certifications. So I don't know if that was a piece of feedback that came out, but it just seems like this is a huge workforce gap. I don't know what feedback they gave about. These guys obviously showed up, so they're invested. So I don't know if there are others out there that aren't, but maybe that could be another way to get some more folks on board.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm sure Dan's team who works on this may know that, but we can just bring that up to him. It's a good point. And I do know that the Economic Alliance is looking through a lot of that as well. I met with Mike French yesterday, and it's kind of the same thing. How do we train people in Durango on technical aspects to improve that kind of work, but also improve people's lives by giving them free education. So they did get a grant to provide that. I don't know specifically on this issue, but I can ask.
Okay, I'll send just that that grant, so you have the specifics on it. But and then the other, just one thing to put forward is this member wanted to just really compliment that LPEA allows members to get the rebate even if they don't have a professional installer on the heat pump, because that is such a barrier. And I know in a lot of rebate programs, I guess the federal one, you have to have a certified installer. So compliments to LPEA for making this accessible and just trying to get across the finish line for something that you don't have to have someone professional to do. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. All right, Carl, you are up. Maintain strong financial health.
Thanks, Jessica. So as we mentioned, going through the main KPIs, first of all, let me just check everyone can hear me. Yep, thank you. We hit all of them and hit all of them quite easily in June, other than cash. Very robust results. Sales were slightly below what we had budgeted, mainly due to a cooler start to the month in June. It seems kind of a million miles away when we're like close to 100 degrees outside right now. But if you recall, the beginning of June was kind of cool. So we did not get the AC load that we would normally get, mostly in our commercial space in June. But we still reported very strong gross margins. That's our sales less cost of power, due to a higher than anticipated load factor. Now, I know when we forecast load, we are generally pretty conservative. We certainly don't forecast crazy winters like we saw this year. And generally, June is a pretty low load factor month, and that's what we budgeted. So I don't want to mislead anybody by saying we had an amazing load factor in June, because we didn't, but it was better than what we had anticipated. So although we were only 2% below on sales, we were actually 6% under what we had forecast for cost of power. So that resulted in a very strong gross margin. Expenses kind of more of the same, good cost control, what we would call the discretionary stuff, you know, travel, professional fees, those were once again considerably under budget. Want to always reiterate that expenses are, we never compromise on safety, reliability, and those are in line with budget. In fact, I think maintenance was slightly over. That was the only expense when we had an overage. So really great results in that sense. You can see our cash number, which Jessica alluded to. Really, that was the capital credit retirement in June. And as Jessica mentioned, we've had 4 out of 6 months where we've been under that 12%. So I do think it's something we need to revisit. I would certainly not recommend borrowing money in the current interest rate climate just to hit a target and have that interest expense. So we're just to quickly look at some of these others. MDSC considerably higher than the debt covenant requirement. Long-term debt we've reduced by $4 million, and we'll be making another payment at the beginning of August. And equity slightly dipped and will continue to dip as all of the capital credit retirements are cashed. Most of them have, so I would expect that will land around 53 even in July or August. So within the target range. Really, that's all I had. Any questions on finances?
Hey, Carl, do you mind describing what high load factor means again, please?
Dan?
So load factor.
I can, but he can do it better.
Yeah. Load factor is defined as the average load divided by the maximum load. And so a high load factor means you've been running very flat and even and steady. And basically what that means is that for the kilowatt hours that we have to purchase, there's less demand charge that has to go with it if you have a high load factor. So our overall cost of power on a per kilowatt hour basis is lower with a high load factor.
So the good thing is you want to be a high load factor.
That's right.
And when you looked at the tri-state rates increases, the people that had the highest increases, like 9%, had the lowest load factor, which means it's very, very variable. So it's good that we kind of have a higher constant rate of power needs. Okay, Kirsten.
Wow. And Dan, what's the, when we talk about load factor, it's to our highest demand point for the month, right? It's compared to that.
Right,
And
right.
And what is that point called, that highest demand point?
The highest demand point.
Oh, okay, great. Okay.
It's our
And then
it's our, they call it our coincident demand, because there's actually,
okay.
it may not be, when we get billed from Tri-State, it may not be the absolute highest, because they have a peak period window, if you recall, from noon to 10 p.m. So if we peak really high in the morning, which we sometimes do in the winter time, that's really not necessarily included in the load factor calculation. But typically we peak inside that peak window at some point, somewhere.
And it's an hour?
30 minutes.
Okay, so 3 minutes?
30
minutes, okay. Okay, so it's sort of similar. I was trying to explain it to some members Because we, and trying to compare it to the the semi demand charge that we put on them, and it's your highest in a month. It's the highest hour in a month in a certain time frame, and it's for us, it's our highest 30-minute period in a month, again in a certain time frame. So have I got that right?
Another house.
Excellent.
Yeah, there's some
Thank you.
background noise here somewhere, but yeah.
Let's see, where was the
Okay.
Kind of sounds like Elizabeth, but I can see she's on mute, which is very strange.
It seemed like it went away now.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, Tim?
Yeah, I think it was actually out of Kirsten's microphone, but maybe background where she's at. In any event, I mean, this question on load factor has come up before, and it's also something which can have a pretty significant effect on the cost of power, right? So I wonder if that's a metric that we should include somewhere in our reporting, you know, the financial report that we get, the one that I love so much, page 1 and page 2. You know, is it worth putting in it's a question, not necessarily a demand or anything, but might help if you see that more often to understand what an impact it has. So I just throw that out there.
Yeah, we can definitely look at that. That's a good idea, Tim. Okay.
Anything else from you, Carl, or any more questions for Carl?
I'm good, thank you, Ted.
Great, yeah. Jessica, oh, you got more for us.
I got more for you. Sorry,
Right,
I was talking myself. I must have muted myself. So
I'm sorry.
Okay. This is our last slide. Yeah, our last slide. So we were awarded $240,000 in a grant. I sent all of the board that email that described the grant and what it was. And then you should also have all the details for the 6 grants that we've applied for. It's now 7, but the 7th one isn't reported till next month. So that'll go up. And then you all have the information. We've been reporting on the last 2 for a while. That's also in that spreadsheet I sent. The USDA PACE one is the one that we'll report on next month's application. That was a lot of work, Dan told me. A lot of employee time to do that one. So pretty happy that he and his team could do that. I appreciate that. And then really good news on the controlling of 3,000 kilowatts of DERs. That's great job. We're almost at our goal for the year. Now that's going to go up and down according to people turn off their ability for us to manage or turn it on. Dan informed me that one of his team members is actually going out and calling members who have these devices to remind them about the ability for this management.
You froze on us, Jessica.
Oh. Did I lose people?
Yeah, for 5 seconds.
Okay. Drew, just to let you know, says the internet connection is unstable. And I know Elizabeth had that same problem. So if any of us freeze, something's going on at our building and I apologize. Okay, so any questions on that slide? Okay.
Oh, Joe.
So when you say we're meeting our goal for the year, I mean, if we go beyond that, we're okay, right? That there's no penalty or anything.
No, it's actually great. So the goal for the 5-year operational plan is actually 5,000. And so we just did it. This is our 3rd year, so it's 1,000 per year. So even if we're over 5,000, that is great news because it means that we're actually shaving peak demand. That's all that is it's just saying, how much are we saving our membership by shaving peak? So we're not paying the high tri-state power costs.
Yeah, we might communicate that, but do the people who have the devices, do they understand that? And I guess why they just forget to, you have to turn them on and off every day, or how does that work?
Dan, do you want to?
Yeah, so Joe, it's a connectivity kind of thing. So like in order for us to control this might have to be connected to the customer's Wi-Fi. If they were to change their password or something, then it loses connectivity. And occasionally these things drop off, or they change service providers, broadband service providers, and we have to get these things back online, such as EV chargers, water heaters, even our Stethus Connects, smart thermostat type of things.
Huh, so it's through Wi-Fi. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be
fabulous.
I mean, our goal is to have our own communications package out there. We can do some stuff from AMI and use that as a backhaul, but it's very typical. It's an Internet of Things type of interface that can receive the messaging.
Is there any way to kind of put a dollar value or make that a little more understandable, what that means when we're controlling 3,000 kW or more?
What that means to us or to the customer?
To the customer.
Yeah, so right now the customers, these are all stacking up the dominoes to get us to be able to have a good DER program. Trying to get the things managed and being able to manage them and control them, and then we roll the programs out and say, for every month your device is connected, we'll give you this extra $5 to $10 incentive on your bill.
Nice. Okay.
Kind of thing. And it depends on how big the load is that we're controlling. Now, that's the same type of thing with energy storage. It plays into it as well. So the bus's 60 kilowatts is part of the 3,000. All those things add up.
Okay, and so and you're still working on getting this whole program together too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, still fairly new.
Right.
Great. Thanks.
All right, Ted.
Yeah. Am I correct? And probably a Dan question. So does this control of distributed energy directly impact our load factor? Are we reducing our loads so that we don't have a bad or a load factor? And if that is a correct statement, is it significant yet, or is our load factor determined by other things more than this?
It is significant. That's exactly the right story. It's very significant in the winter time. As we mentioned, we are a winter peaking load, and that control that we have over our ETS heaters it's 15 megawatts of 150. So it's 10%. It's a pretty sizable control. Now, some of these things are going to stay on more, I'll say, cruise control through rate design and customer incentives through that. Other things are going to be, it can run all month long, except for those key 30-minute windows where we try to control them. And it costs money for every device that we control. So if it can be done passively through rate signals, that's preferable. But for the ones that we need to, like electric vehicles, it'd be nice. Hey, let it charge whenever it wants to, but except for maybe these 2 to 3 30-minute windows where we need to control it during the month. But right now they're just sort of pre-programmed to stay off peak. The next step is, when we have good control of them, is to let them run full time, then we actively control it.
Joe. Oh. I think Joe's in the front.
Like there's a little microphone you can hit and you can talk to the.
You muted, Kirsten.
Sorry, I thought you called Joe.
I did, and then he put his hand up.
Okay, Jessica, I know you don't usually go to the appendix, but will you show the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. So this was from the annual meeting. Nice picture of everybody. Everybody looks great, especially you, Holly. I think it's a great picture of you. It reminded me that we've talked in the past about member involvement and trying to get our members more involved, especially since the board is the voice of the members. We need to be hearing members. And I don't know how many people were online, but we had a lot more chairs than we had people. And I'm glad about the optimism of all those chairs. We have talked in the past about a member increasing member involvement. And I know Rachel had some ideas, and I don't want to let that go to sleep. And in many ways, it's a board responsibility, again, because we are the voice of the members. So certainly the member service reps have a role, and there's all sorts of roles operationally, but there's also a role on the board. And I would like to, Ted, figure out a good time to talk about that. Maybe that's carving out some time in a future meeting. Maybe that's having a little tiny subcommittee for a month or two to say, well, what can we do? Or is there an issue at all? So I would like to put that request in now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kirsten. And I want to take the lead on that. And I do think we should go through a process there. And I'll just put it out sort of right now that, you know, Kirsten, you and I can chat about that, but I would not only be happy to, but I would love to add a couple other board members to the, you know, sort of, let's just call it ad hoc committee, and do some brainstorming and figure out what we should and could bring back to the board for action on that. So that's my commitment, and I'll drive that. And I see Tim with your hand up.
It wasn't necessarily to volunteer to be on the ad hoc.
I didn't assume so.
Not necessarily.
Oh, come on, Tim.
But I was going to go back to the DER piece a little bit. Similarly to the load factor sort of report request, you know, what this really represents, this control of these resources, as Dan mentioned, is an opportunity to shave peak load, which affects beneficially all members, right? Because it helps prevent us from having a big spike in cost, right? And so I just wonder, and like Joe was also mentioning, is there a metric or that we could look at that sort of says, I know it's that this was the impact financially for the co-op as a whole. I know it's hard to measure what you didn't have to pay for versus what we had to pay for. But I mean, is there a historical average or something that would show how this has basically reduced that average peak and therefore a cost associated? I think that something along that line would really help us all to kind of go, boom, this is why this is really important. So.
Yeah, I hear you, Tim. I've been looking for that as well. And it has to really stack up like all the ETF stuff. Then you can really see it, you know, definitely right in front of you on the load profiles. In the summertime, it's rough, and throughout the year. And even though we're having good success at controlling load, there's multiple things going on simultaneously and other things that seriously reduce our load factor, you know, and so that's growing every year while we're trying to do this, and it's making a difference, but it's hard to pin down because there's multiple things going on at the same time.
Yeah, and Tim, I do think it's a great point, though. I did write down that on that bullet, we should talk about how much this would shave peak, because we did it for the school bus. We can do it for this. I think Dan's point is it's not going to be like splashing awesome right now because it's baby steps. But to all your point, yeah, we should be sharing a little bit more information about how much peak we're shaving and how much money that's saving.
Right.
That rhymed. Maybe that should be the
that's it. You're a poet.
Yeah, we'll work on that. I think it's actually a great public communication campaign. So
it's just great feedback. And yeah, maybe we don't get it right, but if we try to sort of refine a reporting approach, it could only get better, I would think, over time. So.
Absolutely. Yep. Perfect. We'll work on that.
And Rachel.
Well, mine is going back to the other comment, but now it's tying in. I was curious where we're at on the hiring of our VP of comms, or if that kind of is still in process. because it was, I think member engagement's tucked in there, maybe, or maybe we restructured. I can't remember.
Yeah, no, we have made an offer, so we can't
Okay.
talk about it yet. Yeah,
Perfect.
but
That's
it's
still active.
very exciting. Very
Awesome.
excited. Yeah.
And then I will also very much raise my hand. Thanks, Kirsten, for the community advisory or engagement discussion. And I have 4 efforts at attempting to get something like this going, documented in little baby white papers and strategy proposals. So I will happily share that kind of archival information with whoever else is in this. And yeah, that would be exciting.
Thanks, Rachel and Joe Lewandowski.
Dan, just coming back to you, you just mentioned there's a lot of things that reduce our load factor. That's what we don't want, right? I mean, I was just, can you explain when you say there are a lot of things that reduce our load factor, what would some of those things be?
Well, the primary one is there's whenever solar is added to the roof, it takes away sales that are kilowatt hour sales, but leaves our same peak behind. So each time our rooftop installation goes in, you know, it's the duck curve. You know, if you've seen that California, it just, that belly of the duck keeps getting lower and lower while the peak stays pretty close to the same, which is why the importance of energy storage it needs to be really driven to counteract that.
Yeah, I talked to a guy from Shaw, and he said they're putting in storage like crazy, which really surprised me. So anyway, a lot of opportunity there, I guess.
And it just has to be something that we can interactively engage with. You know, there's challenges connecting to various vendors, and there's going to be some that are going to be more easily done than others, and we need to get that list of ones that we can control out there.
Is there any resistance, people saying, gosh, this is Big Brother, looking in on my life? Do we hear any of that?
There's going to be some of that, and we're going to have other options for that with a time of use rate.
Thanks.
John Mitchell.
Hey, I just want to weigh in on this idea of expanding the board's role into some, increased community activity engagement. I think I want to be very careful here. This is going to open up a Pandora's box that we will never get back in. Our job is governance, stewardship, financial oversight. Our job is not to be deputized messengers. Our job is not to be substitutes for the marketing team and the PR and the community outreach team. And it is virtually impossible for 12 elected officials to stay on message and be accurate in their communications as they're across the huge range of services that LPEA provides. I think we're just going down a road there that's gonna actually lower the quality of communication. And right now, our customer satisfaction and our level of communication is incredibly high. The community is very satisfied with LPEA because of the hard work of the staff. And I think if we come in and try to pinch hit for the staff, we're just gonna, given enough time and enough touch points, lower the signal and noise ratio and miscommunicate, overstep, get off message, and ultimately leave people dissatisfied. And I think we're at our best when we stay in our lane, which is governance, financial oversight, and not get into this business. So I will be happy to volunteer for that program if that opinion is welcome.
Thanks, John. Of course, all opinions are welcome, and I appreciate that. And I guess just before I go on to Rachel's hand, I want to clarify what I heard from Kirsten and where I think we took that was the thought behind, or the potential for increased community involvement. And what I heard, I didn't hear anything about the board interacting with the community more there. And so, yeah, I completely hear and understand that concern that, there's just no way to have 12 plus touch points and stay on message. I also absolutely hear what I will interpret as kudos to where we are right now. The staff's doing a fantastic job. We are in a great spot from approval ratings. So we're doing a good job there. So I certainly will take you up on some sort of participation in the action we take going forward, so that you can continue to apply that opinion and make sure that we are listening to everybody and staying on track. But I don't expect that we're going as far off track as what I think maybe you reacted to. So that's my statement, and back on to board comments. Rachel, you go ahead.
Yeah, that's kind of how I perceive it too, Ted. It's not actually doing the work, it's more devising the strategy as it aligns with what are these overall goals in our mission. So, but in partnership with staff, I think that's something we've talked about in the past too. So, yeah.
Yeah, and thanks for that piece of the comment, Rachel, that it is in partnership with staff. I mean, I kind of came across as, let me lead this and I'll take some volunteers and we'll get something done. Certainly staff would be involved in that. Staff is the expert here. And we would look back at what, I mean, it really is kind of to the level of board's involvement, a strategic decision. Is our current strategy what we want? Is it accurate? Do we need to modify it? And if we do, then that rolls into, something that's upcoming in the future, which is modification of our strategy if needed. And so I think we want to just be prepared for that discussion in the future. And that's kind of where I see some ad hoc committee work happening here. So thank you, Rachel. Kohler.
Yeah, I'm kind of changing the subject a little bit, but on keeping the lights on, we have a chart in there about the major outage restoration time. And I'm a little bit, I don't know if I'm have my own self-clarity, but Dan, maybe you could clear it up for me, the difference between the major outage restoration and the major event day. Is that a pretty big gap between those two, or is it a pretty fine line between those two different scenarios?
Is that, Jerry, do you want to answer that one? Which slide are you looking at? Is that 10 or
So
11?
a major
I'm on page
Hold on,
38 of 84. 38 of 84 is the page I'm on. And it explains at the bottom what a major outage is. And then I looked at the definition of a major event day, and I just was wondering, how close to each other are those? I mean, I don't know if that question makes sense or not. But
they're tracked so much differently. That's why we report on them separately. The TMED is what we are constantly watching, and it's constantly changing with any planned outage that we have, any disruption in power delivery at all. And any time that average is exceeded, then it becomes a major event day. And I'll shoot you guys an email trying to explain the differences. But major outages are when 250 members are out for 30 minutes or more, or if we lose an entire circuit. So anytime that we lose, let's say Ignacio 141, that is categorized as a major outage. Now, since those occur much more often than a major event days, and since they are unpredicted, unplanned, it gives us in operations the best information that we can utilize for improvement opportunities.
okay, thank you. I look forward to your email. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Kohler, and thanks, Jerry. Tim, I see your hand.
I'm going to go back to the previous discussion before Kohler's question there. What I heard you sort of say there, Ted, was in trying to maybe form some ad hoc committee was really how do we ensure that the directors are hearing more from the members, not the other way around per se, right? That's and maybe I'm misheard, but it started with a discussion about attendance at the annual meeting. And are we hearing from our members, which I would just like to point out, that is like probably the primary responsibility of each of us as a director on the board elected, is to hear and represent the members, right? So, I probably wouldn't argue much with John about how we communicate back to the members. We've delegated that to the CEO, and I think does a really great job with their staff. But we could, in communicating what we all agree and getting feedback on it, that is central to our role as directors. And I just hope we're not talking about somehow that's we should divorce ourselves from that role. To me, that's central, and it's absolutely what we need to do.
Thanks for the comment, Tim. Joe Lewandowski.
Yeah, just FYI, I done Earth Day. I got a table that we set up, and farmers market last year. I haven't set anything up for this year, but it was just people would come up and ask questions, and most of the times I didn't really have a good answer for them, but I always sent it on to Jessica, and staff got back with those people, and it wasn't a huge number of questions. Most people just wanted to say hello, and most people were thanking us for doing a good job. But it was a nice thing to do. I think I enjoyed it. And if anyone ever wants to join me, let me know. I'd be happy to entertain some company.
Thanks for the invitation, Joe, and the report. David, go ahead, please.
Okay. I agree with all the comments, and I'd like to volunteer on the communication thing. And I was just want to compliment, I did talk to Joe at Earth Day, and it's neat seeing the LPA board of directors members out there in the public like that. But when I communicate, I have questions. I do appreciate the website, and I try to direct all the questions to the website. So to John's comment, we don't step on anybody's feet. And if it's not on the website, then I would get with Jessica, but I'd love to volunteer.
Thanks, David. I wrote your name down. Kirsten, go ahead.
Yeah, I attended our Earth Day, and I didn't have a booth, but I was there for a couple hours, and I had a couple people say,
yeah,
why isn't LPEA here? You're here. So let's remember, if we could jot that down next year, let's remember to put, maybe have a little booth at our Earth Day. It was a very cool time. And by our, I'm meaning the Archuleta County one. So sorry, we missed out on that opportunity. And I also want to apologize to the member service reps, because I always refer people to the phone number. I guess I have to get in the habit of referring people to the website, because I always say, oh, call them. They'll talk to you. They'll tell you where to go. But would you guys prefer, Elizabeth, would you guys prefer if I send them to the website, or what do you want?
I'll jump in.
Okay, sorry, Jessica.
That's okay. We talk a lot about this. We would prefer people to go to the website, because there's a Smart Hub app that is a wonderful self-service. And there's a lot more information on our website that even sometimes our MSRs just can't answer, right? So, and what we're finding when we do our member survey every year, by the way, we're doing that this fall, it tells us how members most want to communicate. And I'll be honest, it's less and less in person. There's a new demographic, and the demographic is they want text. They don't want to talk to people. They want to go to the website. They don't want to go to events. So it's been very interesting. We've done a lot of data on this, looking at how we're addressing all of our members. So it is definitely a scientific kind of study on it, but appreciate that, Kirsten. Website's great.
Super, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I just want to step in for just a quick second here, and basically it's a time check, but there's a little comment on time check. I was just about to pat everyone on the back. We're moving along just about right and on track, and then we sort of got into this truthfully off agenda topic about customer, member participation, member involvement. And I think this is just to point out that, going into a non-agenda topic tends to end up just like it did here. We talk around in circles. We may have some potential action, but nobody's really prepared for the discussion. So, I'll take a lump on that one for sort of not nipping it in the bud and moving it offline more quickly. I do appreciate all the comments. They're all great. But I think that it's also something that could easily have happened offline, not on board time. So being the new guy and the new president, it's easy for me to just allow the meeting to keep going and entertain that kind of thing. But just a bit of a warning that in the future, I really do expect that we get things agended and that people are prepared for the conversation before we jump into it. My little point of order speech there. Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that. And one request I would have of you is it's never actually been clear to me how you get something on an agenda. What is that process? What is the timeline, et cetera? But and I know you'll raise your hand and that's great, but just because we do have new members that come on and cycle off, I think if we could write that up, not as policy, but just for you as president, if you have a protocol and a process, if you could write that and send that to us, that would be really helpful. Because I think
it's a super fair ask, right? I mean, it's my responsibility as the board president to set the agenda, but it's not clear what other board members would need to do to get on that agenda. So I'll put together a short, my process for that. And if people comply with that, great. And if they can't, then we'll look into modifying it. Good question, Rachel. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I've said this before. I don't think our job here is to make sure that our meetings last 20 minutes shorter or longer than the agenda says. I think it's important for our members to see that we're having discussions like this and that we're thinking about other things. And I've been on several boards, and I've never been to a board meeting that doesn't go off into a little down some sort of avenue. But I think it's always helpful that we have these discussions. So I will not, if I have something that's coming up that's kind of not on topic, and I think it's important to talk to people I only see once a month, I'm going to bring it up. And I don't think we're doing anything wrong, Ted, and I don't think you have to try to rein anything in, because I don't see that we've done anything wrong or disruptive here.
Well, I hope we're not eliminating the potential for these discussions, Joe. Just possibly and likely postponing them until they can be properly planned for. I think you are correct. Sometimes things come up out of the blue that we can't predict, and I'm not going to try and make sure those things don't happen. But I do think it is important for us to run the meeting professionally and to stay on the schedule that we publish. And it's not always possible, you're right, but it should be what we endeavor to do. So to that point, we will go ahead and move on to the board action section of the agenda. And I believe starting with the update from Finance and Audit Committee, and we'll let Tim, you drive that one, please.
Okay. So I guess we're finished with all the other dashboard issues, right? So, I prepared a report. It's in the packet. I don't have a lot to add to that, other than I am creating a running list of issues that have come up that we've indicated should be addressed at some point by the FAC. So if there is something that somebody feels they would like to hear or see the FAC to address, to feel free to email me with that and copy Jessica, I think. And can't promise, but we'll look at it. So any questions on the report?
I see Kohler's hand up.
Oh, Kohler, go ahead, please.
Yeah, and I don't know if this should go to you, Tim, or to Dan Harms, but it mentions in there that Dan brought up a proposed net metering tariff and a new qualifying facilities tariff. I was wondering, qualifying facilities, is that related to what FERC calls a qualifying facility by definition, or any kind of relationship, or is this something new and you've kind of titled it that way? And I apologize for not being able to make the meeting.
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, no apology necessary. I think Dan's best to address this rather than.
Kohler, that is intended to be the same definition of what FERC calls a qualifying facility. A renewable facility is just a simple way of saying that. And so this would be a rate for over 25 kW on how to handle the interconnection of renewable resources at that size there. We do intend to have a lunch and learn for the board of directors. That was brought up, I think, by you earlier, that I'd still like to do before our next board meeting. And we're also hosting one more solar installer meeting to review these tariffs as well.
Okay, good. That answers my questions. I was getting a little confused if it was two different things. So thank you.
Thank you, Kohler. Rachel, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I was excited to see that y'all are bringing the conversation about the net metered potential rate structure redesign to the installers. And I was curious if there's also what would be prudent or helpful to also bring that conversation to some of the consumers, the members. It seems like that's where a place we get a lot of feedback is on the net metered side of things. But yeah, kind of the community advisory committee, if you will, on just tapping them to ask their thoughts on the net metered rate.
Dan, do you want to address that? Because there is a public process for the community to be involved in this.
Yeah, and so Rachel, we have had, back to the installer side of things, we did already have one group and solar installer meeting on that. We reached out to some one-on-one, and they're really the ones that have the technical knowledge to understand. They're conveying that to the members as well. But once we post our tariffs, that we have to post that, make that public notice as well. And so that's the opportunity for anybody from the public to also comment and bring those concerns to us as well.
Does that answer questions? Anyone else? All right, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Next item on the agenda is the update from Committee on Policies. John Lee, you got something for us?
Yes, we met in June, and in our wordsmithing with additional input, sent it back to Graham for an update so that we could revisit it in July. So next week's meeting, we will look at what we feel is a close. We had to redefine some things in 109, and those will be out probably for August's board meeting for us to consider with our policy committee's approval.
Yeah, John, I'm going to circulate. I was able to complete that draft yesterday, so I'll circulate that so we can get some comments from non-committee members at the conclusion of this meeting.
All right, you'll see that the modifications that we did earlier in those changes that Graham just talked about, and welcome input from the board.
All right, Thank you very much, John. Yes, I actually wasn't able to attend the last Committee on Policy meeting, so apologize for that. But definitely thanks to John for steering that and keeping the process on 109 and future policy review going forward. Any other questions there for John, Committee on Policies? Okay, seeing none. Got it. Okay, we are really right up against break time, which is great. And we'll go ahead and take 10. That brings us back at 10:38. And I think, Jessica, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have attorney update at 10:40. So we'll jump right back onto that.
Yep.
Okay. Break time, 10 minutes, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. All right, we'll give it 30 more seconds, and I'll just take the opportunity, because I intended to do this earlier, to thank our attendees who aren't panelists in the meeting. We've been got 7 people in the room now, and we were up to 10 at one point. So I appreciate the community involvement from that perspective, and thanks to the people who are listening in. And we'll go ahead and jump back onto the agenda. I see Matt has joined us, so thank you for being here, Matt, and we'll let you go ahead and take it away with attorney update.
Yeah, thanks, and nice to see all of you. 3 specific updates on activities at FERC to briefly cover. The first one is, Tri-State has made their comeback rate filing, which was required by the settlement that we reached in the prior rate case. That case is now pending before FERC. LPEA has intervened in that case, along with numerous other member cooperatives. Expect that case to, it has been protested by certain co-ops, and that process will begin to move forward at FERC. So that's kind of the state of play on the rate side. With regard to the BDP, Tri-State has filed a motion that we supported to withdraw the BDP tariff. That is currently pending before FERC. While that withdrawal motion is pending, the ALJ has suspended the hearing schedule. I think, as we've talked about, that was on a litigation track with a decision that would have issued well into next year. So that is now currently suspended while FERC considers whether to allow Tri-State to withdraw the BDP tariff. Can talk about a little bit more about what that means in the executive session. And then the third update, awaiting a CTP decision. The date for it is July 23rd, which is Saturday. I think it makes it likely that it's not a hard and fast deadline. It could slip a little bit, but I think, the best estimation right now is we would see a decision late this week, call it Friday or Monday, because of the Saturday deadline. So we'll be watching for that. Just for a level setting, that is the FERC ALJ's order adopting the FERC trial staff methodology with some modifications for how to facilitate full exits, numerous sets of exceptions, which are essentially administrative appeals to the agency, have been filed, and FERC is considering all of those. So that's kind of the 3 major items from a public update perspective. Happy to field any questions that any of the directors may have. Rachel.
Yeah, just kind of for the public with the BDP, I'm trying to think so what we've kind of put out there is, we applied for open season. And I think, if you're not been following on deeply, that the way we would get there was through this BDP, the partial buy down payment. And so can you speak a little bit to folks out in the audience who might be curious, like, oh, if we're no longer filing for a BDP tariff, is that still on the table, and kind of how we move that forward?
Yeah, I think what I can say, it's a great question. What I can say from a public update perspective is that the open season allotment that LPEA sought and was successful in obtaining, remains LPEA's open season allotment. The regulatory methodology to secure that allotment and have a pathway to, move to an alternative power supply remains under discussion. So just because this structure is potentially going to be withdrawn does not mean there will not be a structure in the future, and work continues on that front.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep. Tim.
So the Tri-State's withdrawal motion on the BDP it's about the settlement, right? Not necessarily the structure of open season. I'm surprised there's an interplay there. I would have thought that remains intact.
Well,
that's a policy of Tri-State's.
Yeah, and if I created confusion, my apologies, but the open season allotment, LPEA still has that. The question is, how do you go about having a tariff so that you can act on it, given that Tri-State is a FERC regulated entity? That tariff was the pathway to do that.
Gotcha.
And one of the things with the settlement, just to be clear from a public perspective, is that the settlement was not accepted by FERC, right? So the case that was going on tied back to Tri-State's original BDP methodology.
Oh.
It was almost as if the case has started over, and that was part of the issue. So when they're withdrawing it, it's not withdrawing the settlement per se, it's withdrawing that BDP structure that dates back several years now, which was one that we had worked constructively with Tri-State and worked with other members to come up with modifications to, that was reflected in the settlement. Unfortunately, there was opposition to that settlement, and FERC did not move forward with it.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions for Matt in public session? Okay. Seeing none, the next item on the agenda is to go into executive session. So I would entertain a motion for that.
So moved, but John Lee to go into executive session.
Thank you, John.
Rachel, a second.
And second from Rachel. Any discussion about this?
I just had a question because Kohler has his hand up too about.
Of course.
Can Kohler stay in the executive session?
I would not have Kohler in the executive session today, given I think some of the things that we're going to be talking about with regard to the BDP and the CTP.
Yeah, okay, so Kohler, when we go in, you can get off, and then we will have, as amended in the agenda, we will have some discussion on broadband partnerships, and we will reach out and invite you back in when that starts, Kohler.
If you would, please call me because my texting doesn't alert me. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, noted. Any other discussion about going into executive session?
Everybody have the link.
Thanks, Tim. Double check, screen now. Okay, all in favor of going into executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. We will see everyone in executive session as quickly as you can get there.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to clarify, we just exited executive session and there are no board actions coming out of executive session. We're taking a 30-minute lunch break before reconvening on the agenda. Plan is to reconvene at 12:50. So thank you and see you then. But let's go ahead and crank up again, jumping into section 9 of the agenda, starting off with attorney report. Graham, do you want to jump in there?
Sure. So a couple things. I'll primarily just submit my written report and be taking some questions here in a second, but you see I did append some notes that we received as staff from the Election Supervisory Committee in their post-election meeting. Just note that pretty much all of those are administration level questions, right? About how to, what language should we print on the envelopes and, sort of, certain payment methods for reimbursements and stuff like that. There really isn't any policy level changes for the board to consider at this time. So I think one of the primary ones is just the way we transfer data. So I will work with IT department to sort of make sure that it's easy for us to get our information to the county clerk in the future. Kohler. Oh, I think you're still muted, Kohler.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Are we good? Okay. So I do have a question on one of the recommendations, and it's the one about the unsigned ballots.
Mm-hmm.
And in the action item, it says display any unsigned ballots. And I'm not too sure. It's probably just the way it's worded, the way I understand it. But I hate to see a ballot with somebody's name on it.
Yeah,
No, that
would just be they're just suggesting sort of, as opposed to like having a auditory announcement, right? Like Kohler McGinnis, your ballot's unsigned, please. If you want to sign it to have it be counted, please report to the front. It would be a list, just on the projection, Kohler McGinnis, etc. Right? And then you would know when you arrived that you could go remedy that. That was just one of their suggestions. I think it sounded to me from speaking to them that that's something that had occurred at past meetings.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, they wouldn't have project the ballot itself. Kirsten, did that address your question too? I thought you had your hand.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Anything for Graham on his normal report? All righty. Moving on, next board reports. Starting with Roundup. Who's tasked with that today? David?
Yes, I got tasked with Roundup. Can Janelle put the spreadsheet that Nicole provided?
Yep, got it.
Okay, if you can put that on the screen, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. So while that's happening in due diligence of time, we did have a special board meeting the 17th. where we're trying to get through the Roundup meetings smoother. The Roundup meetings have been taking a lot of time, and also on how to wait and how to do that. So one bullet point was a grant approval process. How do we streamline that? The other one was future goals and missions. So on the what we had given out, I could speak to that. I don't see the spreadsheet up, but on the Roundup grants for the Boy Scouts, they had requested 1,000. We had awarded 1,000, and that was for them to fix their trailers so they can get out and camp more. Without the trailer, it was hard to get their equipment out there. Next was Durango Wrestling Club. And I did not realize this, but they have these, there you go, thank you. They have these huge mats that are like $15,000 that fill up a an auditorium, and they were requesting 3,000. We gave them 3,000 because it was a community. Some people from from other areas come into Durango to participate at these wrestling matches. People Improving Communities was a local individual, a younger gentleman. He wanted to do a raptor project where he was going to fit out a container to rehabilitate injured raptors. And yes, they do get injured on our facilities. That was a good cause, and we donated 1,500 so we can build out that container. Any questions? Okay. And the next, okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Joe.
I'm the guy, and I used to work for a wildlife department. So this guy, does he have any credentials? Colorado Parks and Wildlife has some pretty strict rules about who can rehab animals, and there are others who do this too.
Great question, Joe. He's a younger gentleman who's working with a certified Colorado professional raptor, I guess, rehabilitator. And he is working with his hours to get that certification. So the certified gentleman will be working with the younger gentleman so he can get his own certification, at the same time helping him set this up properly, that it is a certified site. So great question. So that was some of the questions that we had, is how does this progress? And he did put the certification part in his application, that he is working the hours towards certification.
It's 501.
Yeah,
it's 501c. 501c3.
Yes, that's how they set it up.
Okay, thanks.
So I felt confident that the older gentleman who was certified is actually overseeing what's going on and making sure that it's done correctly, Joe.
And where's the other guy from? Where's the older guy from?
He's local area, is what it sounds like. I didn't ask specifics on his location.
Okay.
But I mean, I assume he's close enough by that he's available to help this gentleman out. And this gentleman's also asking money from the Granges.
Thanks.
Thank you, Joe.
Tim Wheeler. Oh, yeah. Sorry, David.
Oh, no, I saw Tim's hand up. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry, Ted, step on your toes.
Yeah, I'm not, since you asked for questions, I'm just curious about on the spreadsheet or the educational grants.
Yes.
The updated reserve amount is negative 65,000 roughly. I just wonder how we have a negative reserve.
I did not catch that, and I will have to look up why that's such a huge negative. It might be
I think it's pointing to an old cell, a cell that is zeroed. So Rachel or I could help you straighten that out, but you probably can track it back to what it needs to point to, John.
Yeah, I'll track it back. It should not be negative. We'll have to look into what that cell is. This was a great spreadsheet that we've gotten from Rachel, and I did not look into that detail, and you have a very sharp eye.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, it's not critical at this time, but.
No, but we can't go negative, to your point. I agree with that.
All right, thank you.
No, thank you, Tim. Ted, do you want to?
Yeah, no, just a quick comment. I love the format. You know, we've been through lots of different formats with Roundup and Roundup reports. And this one's great. It really helps to kind of define what was given out, how far we dipped in, what's left over. And so, you know, if it gets tidied up in terms of the plus minus stuff, I would love to see this month over month. It really helps kind of keep the big picture in mind. So appreciate the effort that everybody put into getting this put together.
No, thank you, Ted, and it was really helpful on request versus award, and we'll get that cleaned up. And the last was 9R nutrition, and we did move some money from educational grant that we thought we had, and we'll have to clean it up. But that was actually for hydroponics, and they were going to grow supplemental vegetables, lettuce, etc., for the cafeteria, and also have the students work on growing them and harvest them. So it's just not it's an educational and a nutritional And so it ended up at the top, but it does have a student impact, and we thought that was a worthy request. Next, on educational grants, Durango High School, that is their yearly competition. If they make it to the finals of the competition, it's a STEM competition to go to Cape Kennedy, NASA, to work on a theoretical project of living out in space on a planet. So it was several students, and this was to make sure all the students to go. So they already funded more than 3/4 of the students that were going. And then the Miller Middle School was the, I don't know if y'all seen this, but they have the sophisticated Legos that you can program and you can do neat things with it. So it was another STEM. And so the teacher came from another school district and wanted to start this STEM program for the kids who were interested. And they need iPads to program the Legos or the computers within the Legos to make them move and do different things. And so we partially funded it. We felt that there's also the Apple Foundation where you can get additional monies for that. Tim?
No, you finish and then I'll ask my question.
I'm finished with giving the update on that, Tim.
Sorry, I was just looking at the spreadsheet again, and I think the problem is in line 18, amount awarded. It should just be a sum of those above.
Yeah.
So it's creating this problem. Anyway,
yeah.
Just as an FYI, thanks.
No, I appreciate it. I retired like 5 years ago and forgot how Excel cells work. I'm teasing. That's one of those things you just block out. You did all these formulas and it's like little things like the formulas can, and we'll get that fixed up. Any other questions? And we'll get this fixed up and back out to the group. And I'd like to say I appreciate Nicole being part of this, and I appreciate being on the roundup. It is neat to see the community needs and try to address the community needs. Rachel, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm just trying to find all the buttons.
It's me too.
Thanks for stepping into this, and I am sending an email to you and Nicole right now with Kirsten CC'd because you mentioned the piece about mission. And what's the point? And so I apologize. This has been on my docket to get to for a while. June and July have been hell months for me at my other job. But just to flag for you, and this is, I think, important for the overall work, there's been a lot of transition on the Roundup membership, the board membership. And I think there's been quite a bit of thread that hasn't pulled through. And so one of the biggest things I think to carry into your mission conversations is there was that same conversation was brought up, actually, I think by the same person in the past, but there's a whole, I think it was 6 months worth of work and assessment. It was right before Jillian took over to identify what it was like to reach out to grantees, recipients, to see what they wanted out of Roundup. So I will, that report never got put. We sent it out to the Roundup board, but it never got discussed as part of a decision making. So I'll send that to you and then we can chat offline. But I'm saying that so I can be accountable. I'm saying it in public, so make it your way.
Thank you, Rachel. And that will help progress the conversations because that one meeting, we only got to the bullet point, the first bullet point. We never made it to the second bullet point. So it actually very timely. So I do appreciate it. Thank you. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, David. Thanks to you and Nicole for being new appointed members on the Roundup board. We'll move on to Tri-State.
Okay, well, first I'd like to thank Jessica and Dan Harms for coming to our board meeting. I was proud to have them there. It was kind of funny because they got polarized. We went to executive session, they got the boot and I got the stay, so it was a little bit different. So we discussed a lot of Tri-State stuff on my report. You guys talked about executive session and at other times. And I think the relevancy of some of these things don't pop up until later dates. And in the last month, I've gotten 4 of you that asked questions about Tri-State stuff that we discussed. I want to encourage all of you to please send these questions. I think they're really, really valuable questions. They help me out. They kind of re-energize me on that, and I will do my best to get an answer as fast as I can for you. Sometimes I kind of drop out and I'm a little slow at it, but I will try to get them as fast as I can. So I do encourage you to please send questions and reply all to most everybody. This month, the External Affairs Committee meeting was the longest on record. And the chairman of the board, Chairman Raybon, said that that's what we should expect in the future. So there's a lot going on with Tri-State, and there's a lot going on in external affairs. They're putting a lot into that one. One of the discussions we had is what's called the new ERA, E-R-A, and that stands for Empower Rural America. And this is the USDA's title for they have a $9.7 billion budget basically for co-ops in this energy transition. And Jessica the other day did forward you an email from Tri-State kind of showing you the activity that Tri-State's doing to pursue some of these funds. And look that over, it's pretty interesting. One word of caution, and that is a confidential document. There's some non-disclosure agreements tied to it, so please don't share that with the public. But you can look that over, and that came from Jessica. During that discussion, we also talked about an IRS guidance. This was guidance on the direct payment. And just a reminder, a direct payment is where nonprofits or not-for-profits like LPEA and Tri-State can actually get some benefit when we purchase something. Since we aren't a taxable entity, we can get a direct payment for that. And the IRS came out with the guidance that really kind of did away with the benefit of that. I talked to Jessica right after that happened, and she said, well, this is just the first writing. And with her knowledge and her experience background in Washington, that was encouraging. And hopefully that'll get changed so that we can have the benefit of that. I know that Tri-State's, they're working on that hard with their lobbyists back there to make sure that that does get changed. Another big topic is with the BLM, and that's the Bureau of Land Management. One of the biggest issues that Tri-State has is with permitting. I think that's going to be nationwide, and it's going to expand past BLM as we move forward. I think this kind of ties into what Dan Huntington talked about this morning, and the concern I have moving forward as well, because this transition, if you look at the two projects locally, that would be Sunnyside and the Hesperus project, there was some protests out there, people that really were against it. And to me, these were pretty confined projects that were on private property and pretty condensed there. I just wonder what's going to happen, and I'm seeing it at Tri-State, but once you start adding transmission, it boils people up pretty good. So we'll see a lot dealing with permitting on a local basis as well as a government basis. The other thing with BLM is the wildfire liability. Because right now, the way they're pushing it is if you have a power line on BLM property and there's a fire, you're automatically liable. It doesn't matter where the fire was or anything else, they're you liable. And it just happened that morning that we had talked about it. I was watching the local Denver news when I was in my motel room. They said that the insurance companies filed a $1 billion lawsuit against Xcel for the Marshall Fire. And they showed a picture of a substation. They kind of made the intention that that's where it started. And it was a pretty small facility, something like you would see on LPEA's system. And it kind of wakes you up to the liability that's going to come forward with these wildfires. So just something in the back of your mind. We also had a real encouraging thing, and that is with the water levels at Lake Powell. The generation this year is 30% up and over what it was last year. So that was very encouraging. And then the last thing I'll mention, I'll open up for questions, is the formulary rate design. As Kirsten mentioned, I did forward you an email that Dwayne sent just a little bit ago. And it's talking about what happened with the comments on July 14th, which was last Friday, that came in. And I think there'll be a press release here pretty quick from Tri-State as well. So with that, I'll open it up for questions. And I see, Rachel, your hand is up. I'll start with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kohler. There's a lot in this report. Just one of the things to kind of add on to the conversation around agrivoltaics, or excuse me, solar installs and siting. I know that the state was down here with they're doing a listening tour. I think they had four locations across the state specific to their greenhouse gas reductions plan. This was out of, I think, the Colorado Office of Energy spearheading it, but there were reps from 8 different state departments that came down, and that was one of the top issues that got flagged. And it was really interesting. County commissioners were there, ag interests were there, the kind of public that were really adamantly opposed to the solar installs were there. And I'll be curious to see if out of those listening sessions, this moves toward a state level, but certainly at a county level, what was identified is the need to have some best practices around solar installation project best practices on siting. And so there is actually a conversation starting around that at a county level, and I'm sure Jessica and the team will be invited into that one and if it moves forward. The other question I had is, I am curious if there's, and I don't even know if this is possible, just with everything that goes on now with FERC, and here we had a rate design that passed through the board, right, where members approved it by majority, and now it's at FERC, and now perhaps some of the same members are opposing it at FERC because that's part of the process. Is there any talk at Tri-State about re-exploring its membership portfolio and potentially kind of removing itself from the FERC regulatory umbrella?
I would say there's some water fountain conversation, but nothing official. No. I don't think they're pursuing that at this point in time. It is very, very expensive, and some of us scratch our heads and go, man, was this a good move or not? But the alternative was that before we were in FERC, we were under 4 different PUCs basically, and 4 different states. And that was really impossible for Tri-State to operate. If you look at the difference between the culture of Colorado and Wyoming, try to, consolidate those two, it's almost impossible. So yeah, there's some disadvantages, some advantages, but right now there's no official talk about revisiting that. Holly, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Kohler. Thank you for your work. That was a great comprehensive report. On page 54 of 84 in Dwayne Hiley's summary on the Tri-State report, he's talking about they're still working on funding under the new ERA legislation. So my question to you is, that Tri-State's been talking for quite some time about a $65 million pot, and I was thinking that was like coming from USDA and RESP. Is this the one in the same pot that they're still working on, or has that 65 million been secured?
It has not been secured yet, and there's actually a presentation in our drive. I think it's called funding. It has funding in there, and Ted might be able to remind me what the title is because I sent the link to him. And one of the good slides in there, it shows the progression of working with the government on getting some of these grants and some of these other things. And for instance, at first you send in an application, and then they give you permission to move forward or not. I mean, or maybe it's even before that. They give you the ability to send in an application. So there's all kinds of steps. So those steps are not absolutely complete on that 65 million. That is a different thing than what the ERA is, the new ERA. So it's a different course that we're taking. And there's actually 2 of them over there. And I think the other one was for 50 million as well. But I don't have updates on that as far as them being secured. Does that answer your question, Holly?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, sir. And I just wanted to make a comment on the permitting for wildfire mitigation. One of the pieces that came out at CREA was in James versus Pacific Corp. It was an Oregon jury found Pacific Corp liable, and that entity will be ultimately liable for up to $1.6 billion for starting a wildfire. So this is something that's definitely on my radar. But thank you. And it makes me think, oh, yay, staff for putting up Vipers and one shots and all that stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's something everybody's gonna have to become aware of. And yes, it is comforting to see the proactive stance LPEA is taking. So appreciate your comment. Ed?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in. I think, did you ask the question about what the ERA was specifically? Was that the question that you threw out to me? Like I saw the email from you, Kohler.
I'm not too sure I understand what you're asking.
Oh, I thought you sort of just asked, said Ted might be able to explain what that was.
No, I'm sorry if I ask it that way, but there's a presentation in the drive, and I told you we didn't have it, but the title was different. And I didn't know if you remembered the title or not. Something to do with funding.
No, I was just, the empowering.
Not what empowering rural America is what it stands for. We're good. All right, with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Ted. Thank you.
You bet. And, oh goodness. CREA is our next report. And honestly, I can't remember who's reporting on that.
That would be me, but don't we usually have fast track first, or does it matter?
Oh, I passed up fast track. I apologize for that. And you are correct. Let's keep it in order, and we'll let Tim do that report.
All right, thank you, everyone. So just as a reminder, our meeting schedule for fast track this year has changed, our board meeting schedule, so that our board meetings occur the day before the LPEA board meeting. So our July board meeting was yesterday. So I don't have my report is a month in arrears as a result of that. You could think of it that way. So so before I ask if you have any questions on the report that I gave for last month's fast track board meeting, I'd just like to make a couple of updates. One is that La Plata County had spearheaded a grant request to the National Telecom, I forget, some NTIA, I forget what it all stands for, who had a serious amount of grant dollars for use across the US for middle mile. And La Plata County put in a grant request with a number of local providers, and unfortunately, it didn't get met. Of all that money, and I forget how much it was altogether, I could probably dig it up here. That was awarded. The state of Colorado was not very high in that list. It was maybe 4 million out of a much larger pot, and the 60 million La Plata County had asked for was rejected, which was kind of disappointing. Also, I think you all saw, maybe Jessica disseminated the what's called BEAD, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. That was passed, I think, similarly to the same time as the New ERA. I could be wrong. There were 3 different bills the federal Congress passed. And in this one, there was, or for this program, there was something like 42 billion nationwide. And they then went through a process to award that money to the various states based upon how the states sort of applied for that. Each state was guaranteed, I think, like 100 million at a basic level. Colorado got 826 million for this, and it will be granted through the Colorado Broadband Office. And it will be done in a way in which the various public-private partnerships or public-private cooperation in their application to use those funds are presented to the CBO. The net result will be unknown for a while, but there is a sense that Southwest Colorado has a good chance to access a fair bit of that. So, you know, this is money that could be used to potentially really strengthen internet and broadband services in this part, but still to be seen. What's really interesting is how much money we got, which is probably more than we should have expected, which is good news. So that's kind of just 2 updates, stuff we learned last week. And I'll take any questions on my fast track report from the June board meeting. This is July already. So if anyone has any questions, feel free. Couldn't have been that good a report. All right, I guess that's it, Ted.
All right, then it is Holly's turn.
Great, thank you, everybody. All right, CREA. It started, so I have to apologize because last meeting I did say, oh, I don't have another meeting till August, but lo and behold, a board packet showed up a couple of days later. So it was a virtual meeting, and started out with the executive director, and what I wanted to talk about there was Kent Singer belongs to a group called RESMA. It's the Rural Electric Statewide Managers Association. So all the statewide managers get together to talk about issues. And what's interesting about that to me is the top topic that they're talking about right now is the Clean Power Plan timeline, which is going to require significant carbon emission controls on anything that operates after 2031. And they're discussing what to do about that. NRECA is preparing comments on it. He's reporting that there's a lot of net metering discussions going on. Craig Johnson, the attorney for CREA, is supposed to be coming out with a white paper. In fact, I think Jessica may have already seen it because it's circulating among the managers right now for this, you know, to put a fine point on it. And I'd also like to just thank the staff for talking to our local providers as well. I think that's important to get that viewpoint as well. He also talked about going up to Light Up Navajo for Project DMEA is spearheading something on the Navajo Nation. And so I know that's really important to a lot of directors on this board. So I just wanted to point that out. Legislatively, Tim Coleman is reporting that interim committees are starting to form up and talk about things like wildfire and ozone, net metering, the upstream oil and gas electrification of facilities. They did discuss CARE and how it's the political contributions committee. Its donations are going off. On the legal and regulatory front, I did want to point out that James versus Pacificor, you know, juries are increasingly finding utilities liable for wildfires and stuff like that. So that's definitely got to be on the radar. They also talked about the IRS direct pay tax credits and the proposed guidance that is coming out. On the education front, Ethan McGinnis was apparently a very fine representative of our area and was commended by several of my fellow CREA board members. They're participating in the Guatemala project. They're providing some wiring of several houses along in Guatemala there. And Colorado is also putting together some backpacks of hygienic supplies and school supplies. So they're working on that. In the communications front, postal services rates are going up. Safety and loss, they're looking for an administrative assistant. Not that I'm suggesting any of you leave now. I think that that's about it. I'm also looking at working on organizing a trip to Jack's Solar Farm. It's an agrivoltaic system up in the Boulder area, perhaps somewhere around the end of August, and it's free to elected officials. So if any of you guys are interested in perhaps joining me, let me know. Other than that, I think that's it. Does anybody have any questions? All right, Kohler.
I don't have a question, just a comment. And I serve on the Colorado Electrical Education Institute, which is under the umbrella of CREA. And not only do we do education, but we also oversee the burn fund. And for the first time since I've been on the LPEA board, we had to use some of the burn fund funds. Alignment in San Isabel Co-op, I got an electric contact and had second and third degree burns. And I just bring this up because it kind of reminds us the seriousness of our employees and what they do, the risk they have. And I was really happy when Carl said in the beginning, we don't cut corners on safety as far as the financials. So thank you on that, but keep our people out there in the field in your mind and wish them the best. Thank you, Holly.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kohler. I had not heard that, so I appreciate you passing that on. And yes, kudos for keeping safety priority. Definitely. Anybody else have any questions? All right, I really appreciate everything that all of you do.
Thanks a lot, Holly.
Sorry, I had trouble.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Tim.
Right button there. So, Holly, on the legislative committee, you mentioned that Tim Coleman's been participating in stakeholder meetings on topics such as net metering and net zero. Do you have an idea of who are the stakeholders and what is the tenor of those discussions? Direction?
Yes, that is a good question, Tim, because that was also the question in the CREA staff mind. Now, they named two cooperatives as being part of this, one being, I believe it was United and the other Holy Cross. And it was a closed door meeting. And from what Kent Singer is saying, he was, I don't know how you would term this, kind of taken aback at how kind of closed it was. And there was no minutes, there was no transparency. So I'm sorry, I cannot, I mean, there was no further information available to me, sir.
Yeah, if I may, Holly's absolutely correct. The email that we got said that they're under non-disclosure agreements, which seems very odd to me. If you recall, this actually began because Holy Cross submitted their request for changing rates. So this is what this all is about. I don't know why only United was invited and why it's a very limited group and why it's not open and transparent. I mean, I would have thought something such as this would have been, they would have been more inclusive, and it's not a very inclusive process.
And just to clarify, this was convened by the governor?
That's correct.
Not one of his administrative heads or department heads or something?
What was the energy office? Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. The energy office approached Holy Cross and asked them to delay the implementation of their new net metering tariff that they were going to roll out. So the energy office asked them to delay that so that apparently they could have a closed door meeting and figure out, you know, the logistics or get a more of an idea of what's going on. That's kind of the impression that I'm getting from what I'm getting from CREA staff. But it was like Jessica said, they didn't invite everybody to the table. So I don't know if that's coming down the pipeline. I mean, it almost has to. I mean, for it to be really successful, I would think.
All right. And do we know if the governor was in this meeting or it was just his department?
Not that I don't know, sir.
We don't know anything. We just know of him.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you learn more, please let us know. Thanks.
Definitely will. All right. If anybody comes up with any other questions or thoughts or concerns, please send them my way.
Absolutely, Holly. We'll move on to Western United, and David gets to give another report.
Thank you, Ted. I did get an email from Western United. It was their preliminary sales. Their fiscal year did end June 30th, but it's pre-audit. I will share that with you after my, probably after the August 24th. August 24th, I'll be going up to Western United. Their a big meeting up there, and they have a fish fry. And thank you, John Lee, for helping me out with travel, etc., how to do that. But when I get the final report and get that meeting done, I'll have more to report out. So right now, everything's preliminary, and I did not want to share an unaudited sales forecast. Any questions?
Yeah.
Thanks, Ted.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you too, David. Okay, so that's the end of our normal agenda. Any other last minute roundup comments? Tim is first in line.
Yeah, so there's a report in our packet, Director Advisory Group meeting notes for June 2nd. And I think Kirsten at one point said that that was her that put that in there, even though there's not a name on it. And I just would like kind of a reminder of what is the Director Advisory Group?
Sure.
And why the report is in our packet.
Sure, I included the report mostly because it had the further information about the changes in the NRECA training schedule and in the classes that they were going to be doing. The Director Advisory Group is an NRECA group, 12 directors from around the country who meet quarterly and talk about various topics, mostly around education. I've mentioned it a couple times. This is the first report that I put out.
Great, thanks for the reminder.
Joe Lewandowski.
Yeah, just curious, we had that complaint about how the Zoom call was broadcast last time. I just wondered what we did to try to fix that.
Yeah, Joe, we all listened to it. There's no problem with the sound. That's not the issue. But I think what he wanted is that during the Zoom meeting, Drew had just the agenda up as a big screen and not the people. And so for future, not Zoom meetings, but for in-person meetings, we're not going to show the agenda as being like the main screen. We'll show the boardroom as the main screen.
Okay, thank you.
Dan Huntington.
Yeah, just the fair coming up. Does the staff need help from the directors to staff that booth, or where are we at on that?
Yeah, I think we reported on this last month. I'm not sure though, Dan. So we did. We are going to do we're changing it up. We're moving the booth over to the 4-H section where the kids are, and we're doing more of a STEM kind of programming with them. And that was what we reported at one of the dashboards where Dan hosted the Make a Motor. So we invited the 4-H kids to come in and we worked with them to make motors. And then we're showcasing that. So that way it's not a staffed booth, but you're more than welcome to go and hang out at the booth. That's not a problem, and answer questions. So it's really any time you want to go and stand there. We don't have set schedules anymore because we're not doing the wheel.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Kohler, go ahead.
Yeah, I send out a lot of stuff that I get from Tri-State. I just want to make sure that Nicole and David are receiving that, and that I know when we do the group email, I just want to make sure that board one is updated for them, and Sue and Bob are off of it.
Thank you. I've been getting everything.
I've received
Okay,
them. Thank
good.
you, caller. Thank you for your work. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks.
And kudos to IT for making it happen. Tim, go ahead.
So regarding the fair, I'm wondering when we'll have a 4-H motors for electric vehicles that will appear in the demolition derby. That's what I want.
Tim, you and me both, actually my whole team. And I want to drive it because that would be really fun. But you know what we can do, Tim? is we can actually enter you into the bull riding contest on behalf
Well,
of
I think if you
LPEA.
put me in a demolition derby, I'll be the first taken out, you know. It'll just put a target on there. You know?
Actually, that's such a great idea. I mean, you may get like the engineers thinking about that now.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. They make the motor. It goes in the EV. It goes in the demolition derby. I like it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. Any other last minutes? Just one from me, since we're on item 10 on the agenda, and I don't know that I've seen this in the past, but there is a live link to the sign-in sheet. So this might save Janelle a couple of emails if everybody makes sure they get their sign-in on the sign-in sheet for this board meeting. Easy way to get there, and keeps Janelle from having to chase you down later. And Dan Huntington.
Just a little reminder, we were talking about fires. Yesterday evening, I pulled into GCC to pick up a load of coal, and I see smoke rising in behind their loadout. And I thought it was a loader starting up or something, a lot of blue smoke coming straight up in the air. Come to find out, they had a short in their substation and was putting out quite a bit of fireworks, and but it wasn't a major deal that shut them down for very long. But anyway, anytime things can happen, so we got to be aware and report what you see.
Yeah, much appreciated. You know, good safety topic for everybody on the way out. Okay, then we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and thank you to everybody for your time today, and great
Good job
work.
by the new president.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Right on time.
Nice job, Ted.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Talk soon, everybody. Bye.
Hello.